The luxurious first-class cabin froze when the flight attendant blocked Sophia's path. "Ma'am, I think there's been a mistake. This section is for first-class passengers only." The wealthy passenger's stares pierced Sophia like daggers as her legitimate ticket was openly questioned. No one imagined that within minutes, Eduardo Vasquez, billionaire, Sophia's devoted husband, and majority owner of this very airline, would walk through that door and completely transform the power dynamic in this cabin of hasty judgments. Sofia Mendez nervously adjusted the watch on her wrist, a gift from her husband that reminded her of their first meeting. At 35, her simple yet elegant dress contrasted with the jewelry and designer clothes that dominated the priority boarding area. The first-class cabin of Stellar Airways gleamed with its spacious leather seats, impeccably dressed flight attendants, and the aroma of freshly served champagne. Eduardo had insisted she enjoy this flight alone as a reward for the successful charity event she had organized. "You deserve all the luxury in the world," he had said before being called to an emergency meeting. He promised to meet her at the resort a few hours later. Sophia took a deep breath and handed her first-class ticket to the attendant at the gate. It was time to allow herself a bit of the luxury she usually avoided, despite being married to one of the richest men in the country. "I'm sorry, but this area is for first-class passengers only," declared Camilla Reynolds, the head flight attendant, her gaze coldly assessing Sophia's simple dress. Her condescending tone cut through the air like a blade. Tall and impeccably groomed, Camilla wore her blonde hair in a tight bun, her crisp navy uniform adorned with gold stripes that she seemed to wear as badges of superiority rather than service. "I have a first-class ticket," Sophia responded calmly, extending her boarding pass. Camilla took it with her fingertips, as if fearing contamination, her French manicured nails gleaming under the cabin lights. There seems to be some kind of error," Camilla replied, her perfectly shaped eyebrows rising in doubt. "Perhaps you were incorrectly entered into the system." She made a show of examining the ticket from multiple angles, her lips pursed in exaggerated skepticism. A man in an expensive suit looked up from his financial newspaper, his gold cufflinks catching the light as he lowered his reading glasses. "Happens all the time," he commented, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Economy class is getting too crowded these days." Several first-class passengers glanced up, some with barely concealed smirks, others with uncomfortable curiosity. A couple in matching designer outfits whispered to each other, their eyes darting between Sophia and her modest attire. Camilla smiled with false sympathy, her teeth blindingly white. "Let me check if there's a place for you in the back of the plane. I'm sure you'll be much more comfortable there." The emphasis on comfortable carried a clear message. You don't belong here. Sophia felt her face burn, a flush creeping up her neck. "Please check again. My husband purchased this seat specifically for me." She maintained her poise, years of professional training as a flight attendant herself coming to her aid. "Your husband?" A woman with a diamond necklace the size of a small grape laughed softly, her voice dripping with condescension. "Darling, everyone says something like that when they want an upgrade. Next you'll tell us he's a CEO or something equally creative." Discreet laughter rippled through the cabin as Camilla motioned to another crew member, exchanging knowing looks. Sophia touched the watch Eduardo had given her the day they met, when she was still a flight attendant herself. The cool metal against her skin centered her. Memories of the simpler life she led before meeting him gave her strength. She had faced prejudice before, but never expected to encounter it from colleagues in the profession she had once loved. A businessman nearby tapped impatiently on his armrest. "Some of us have meetings to get to," he commented to no one in particular. "Can we resolve whatever this is and take off?" Camilla straightened her already perfect posture. "Please wait here while I resolve this misunderstanding," she said, with an artificial smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Perhaps it's better if you wait at the boarding gate while we clarify the situation." Her tone made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. Sophia felt a wave of conflicting emotions, embarrassment, indignation, and a flicker of anger. She could easily mention that she was the wife of Eduardo Vasquez, principal shareholder of Stellar Airways. One word from her could change everything in an instant. But something inside her resisted. Why should she need her husband's name to be treated with dignity? The cabin manager approached, his expression serious beneath his perfectly positioned hat. "Ma'am, it appears we have a problem with your reservation. I'll need to ask you to accompany me off the aircraft while we resolve this." His tone was professional but firm, brooking no argument. The looks of pity and disdain from the other passengers weighed on her as Sophia struggled to maintain her dignity. A woman in her 60s wearing what appeared to be a full set of sapphires clicked her tongue disapprovingly. A young executive typing on his laptop barely suppressed a smirk. Sophia stood her ground, her voice quiet but steady. "My ticket is valid. I have every right to be here." Camilla's smile tightened. "Security protocols, ma'am. We can't have just anyone sitting in first class without proper verification. Just anyone." The words hung in the air, laden with implication. It was at that moment that the aircraft door opened again. The aircraft door opened with deliberate precision, revealing the imposing silhouette of Eduardo Vasquez. Standing 6'2" with broad shoulders, his presence commanded attention without effort. His impeccable navy blue Tom Ford suit, tailored to perfection, contrasted with his confident, relaxed posture. Silver threads at his temples added distinction to his otherwise dark hair, cut in an executive style that spoke of power without ostentation. The cabin fell silent. Eduardo's steel blue eyes, sharp and observant, scanned the space methodically before locking on to Sophia being confronted by the staff. His expression remained neutral, but those who knew him might recognize the slight tightening around his eyes, a warning sign of the controlled fury building beneath his composed exterior. "Sophia?" Eduardo's voice was deep and measured, yet somehow filled the entire cabin. "Is there a problem?" Camilla and the manager exchanged panicked glances, uncertainty replacing their previous confidence. "Sir, we're just resolving a small seating confusion," the manager explained, his tone suddenly solicitous, body language shifting to accommodate this unexpected variable. Eduardo walked down the aisle with the unhurried confidence of someone who owned not just the plane, but the very air around him. Each deliberate step brought him closer to the confrontation, passengers shrinking back instinctively as he passed. "But that's my wife's seat, correct?" Two A's. His accent carried the faintest hint of his Spanish heritage, giving his words a melodic quality that belied their authority. "Your wife?" Camilla repeated, the color draining from her face like water from a broken vessel. The whisper that traveled through the cabin was immediate and electric. Eduardo positioned himself beside Sophia, one hand gently touching the small of her back, a gesture both protective and claiming. His six-figure watch gleamed subtly on his wrist, not ostentatious but unmistakably valuable to the knowing eye. "Yes, Sofia Mendez Vasquez, my wife? Has there been an issue with her accommodation?" His question, though phrased politely, carried the unmistakable weight of someone accustomed to getting answers. The manager's composure cracked visibly. "Mr. Vasquez, we had no idea. We were just following protocol to verify." "Verify what exactly?" Eduardo asked, his gaze steady and penetrating as it moved deliberately from the manager to Camila, pinning each in turn. "Whether she belongs in first class based on her appearance." The cabin fell into absolute silence, the kind that seems to swallow even the sound of breathing as the realization of who he was, and the magnitude of their mistake, began to dawn on everyone present. "Mr. Vasquez, we didn't know," Camilla stammered, her face now completely pale. All previous arrogance evaporated like morning dew under a harsh sun. The badge on her uniform visibly trembled with her shaking, the gold pins catching light with each nervous movement. Sweat beaded along her hairline, threatening her perfect makeup. Eduardo's presence seemed to expand, filling the cabin with an almost palpable energy. Though he hadn't raised his voice or made any aggressive movements, the power dynamic had shifted seismically. At 45, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had built an empire from the ground up. Not through inheritance or luck, but through intelligence and unwavering determination. "Clearly," he replied, the single word hanging in the air like a verdict. Eduardo carefully observed the scene, his eyes, a penetrating blue that one business magazine had once described as capable of seeing through corporate smokescreens, registering every detail. Sophia's embarrassment, her shoulders slightly hunched despite her efforts to appear composed, the now wide-eyed looks of the passengers, some frantically tapping on their phones as they recognized him. The flight crew's sudden, almost comical shift in posture, from authoritative to servile in seconds. When he spoke, his voice was calm but carried an authority that made each word weigh like lead. "Did you know that before we married, Sophia was the youngest head flight attendant in the history of Stellar Airways?" His hand remained protectively at the small of Sophia's back. "She understands more about protocol and service than probably everyone in this cabin combined." An audible sigh ran through the seats. The woman with the diamond necklace who had mocked Sophia now intensely studied the in-flight magazine, her fingers nervously twisting her gold wedding band. The businessman who had complained about delays suddenly found his shoes fascinating. She once prevented a mid-air emergency by noticing a passenger's symptoms, before even the man himself realized something was wrong. Eduardo continued, a hint of pride warming his measured tone. "Saved his life. The airline gave her a commendation that's still displayed at headquarters, though I'm beginning to wonder if anyone here has actually seen it." Camilla's complexion had gone from pale to ashen. The manager tugged nervously at his collar, a bead of sweat tracing a path down his temple. Eduardo continued, his tone unchanged. "I asked for the flight to wait for my arrival because I wanted to surprise my wife. It seems I arrived at an opportune moment." The pause before opportune spoke volumes, a masterclass in understated threat. He turned to the manager, who now clutched his hat in front of him like a shield. "As the majority shareholder of Stellar Airways, I am deeply concerned about what I've witnessed here today." The words majority shareholder fell like a silent bomb in the cabin. A passenger near the window audibly gasped. Camilla had to lean against the back of a seat to remain standing, her knuckles white where she gripped the leather. "Mr. Vasquez," the manager began, his voice cracking slightly, "I can assure you this was an isolated misunderstanding." Eduardo raised his hand, the simple gesture immediately silencing the man. "Misunderstandings have consequences, don't they?" His tone was almost conversational, making the implied threat all the more potent. He pulled his phone from his pocket, typing quickly with decisive movements. "I've just sent an email to the board. Starting tomorrow, all Stellar Airways employees will undergo a new anti-discrimination training program." He looked directly at Camilla, his gaze unwavering. "Ms. Reynolds, you'll have the honor of being the first participant." Camilla swallowed hard, unable to respond, her career flashing before her eyes. The silver wings pin on her uniform, once worn with such pride, now seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. "As for the position of Director of Customer Experience that we were discussing filling," Eduardo continued, turning to the manager, "I believe my wife, with her previous experience at the company and her recent experience as a customer, will be perfectly qualified to take over, if she wishes." Sophia's eyes widened slightly. This was the first time she had heard of such a position. A flicker of surprise crossed her face before she composed herself. Eduardo then addressed the passengers, his voice projected for all to hear, but without raising it. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay. As compensation, champagne will be complimentary throughout the flight." Then, just for Camilla, he added in a lower tone that still carried to those nearby, "Please ensure my wife receives appropriate attention during the flight. Your future with the company depends on it." Camilla nodded silently, her empire of arrogance completely crumbling before everyone. The transformation was complete, from imperious authority figure to humble servant in the span of minutes. She stepped back, motioning to the other flight attendants to begin service immediately. No one in the cabin missed the irony or the lesson. The businessmen who had been dismissive now looked on with newfound respect, not just for Eduardo's power, but for Sophia's dignity throughout the ordeal. At the luxurious beachfront resort, Sophia and Eduardo shared a glass of wine on the private balcony of their suite, the sunset tinting the ocean in golden hues. The flight, after the initial confrontation, had proceeded in tense silence, with Camilla avoiding eye contact, while serving Sophia with an almost painful deference. "You always knew how to make an entrance," Sophia commented, a small smile playing on her lips. Eduardo laughed softly. "This wasn't how I planned our reunion," he admitted, holding her hand, "but I confess it was satisfying to see their expressions." Sophia contemplated the ocean for a moment. "You know, for years I've avoided using your name or position. I wanted to be recognized for my own merits, not as Mrs. Vasquez. And you achieved that, Eduardo affirmed. The charity event you organized raised more money for underprivileged children than any other in the foundation's history. Still, Sofia hesitated, touching the watch he had given her years ago. Sometimes I miss my independence, the career I was building. Eduardo studied her face for a moment. That's why I created the position of Director of Customer Experience. It's not a favor, Sofia. It's because there's no one more qualified. Sofia looked at him in surprise. You planned this before the incident on the plane? Eduardo smiled. It was going to be your anniversary gift. You have the experience, the vision, and now, after today, you know exactly what needs to be changed. Sofia felt unexpected tears in her eyes. You never stopped believing in my potential, even when I doubted myself. Eduardo gently touched the watch on her wrist. Remember what I said when I gave you this? That time is the only luxury that truly matters. How we choose to use it and with whom. Sofia nodded, remembering the young businessman she had met years ago when she served coffee in first class. That flight attendant taught me more about dignity and excellence in a 3-hour flight than I learned in years of business meetings. Eduardo continued. I didn't fall in love with Mrs. Vasquez, the billionaire's wife. I fell in love with Sofia Mendez, the woman who treated all passengers, from the CEO to the child traveling alone, with the same unwavering respect. Sofia squeezed his hand, the sunset reflecting on the watch that marked not just the hours, but the journey they had shared. So, Eduardo asked softly, what does the future director of customer experience think about transforming Stellar Airways? Sofia smiled, feeling lighter than she had in years. I think it's time for a new chapter. So, what did you think of this unexpected twist? Did the moment when Eduardo revealed himself as the airline's owner surprise you as much as it shocked that arrogant crew? Unfortunately, many people are judged daily by their appearance, clothes, or background, without others knowing their true story and worth. Have you ever experienced a similar situation or witnessed someone being unfairly underestimated? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories like this one, and activate the bell to be notified when we publish new videos. Your comments are super important to us. Tell us which part of the world you're watching from. Share this video with someone you believe needs to hear this powerful message about not judging by appearances and how a person's true value goes far beyond what the eyes can see. Until the next story that will make you rethink your perceptions and celebrate the power of treating everyone with dignity and respect.